Project Workbench.
Just loop it later. So, GDR.
There's some pretty sophisticated filters out there.
Hey, I got you. Yeah, man, to take out in the department.
Tim Russ. So Tim, you have an illustrious history with Star Trek. And what I really want to talk to you today about is Star Trek Renegades. What is Star Trek Renegades?
Star Trek Renegades is essentially a mission to help prevent a disaster that is coming to Earth, except for the fact that it operates outside of the bounds of the Federation. It operates outside the regulations of the Federation. So it's an undercover type of operation. That's the basic idea, the basic pitch. I dare say, I make the analogy sometimes to the Middle Ages when you had the pirate ships on the open seas. Sometimes the major countries that were being raided would make a deal with the pirates to not raid their ships, but only their enemies' vessels, and so that they would sort of be working under the table to accomplish the goal for that host country. So that's a loose analogy, but essentially, Renegades, the whole idea and the concept behind Renegades is, as far as Star Trek goes, is that we are pushing the boundaries. We're going forward. We go forward in time over a decade.
So this is taking place within normal continuity, like Voyager, Next Generation, DS9 universe?
Yes, it's in that universe, but it's about 11 years, maybe 12 years in the future from that point in time. So politically things have changed. There are things changing in terms of the outlying areas of the Federation space. There are new characters introduced into this story, and Renegades essentially, the main idea is that this is different than what we've seen before.
Okay.
And there'll be a lot of things that will be a little bit different.
So new type of storytelling, new opportunities.
New type of storytelling, new concept, new look. Also some of the characters that we are familiar with in terms of some of the other shows, if you see them, they may be a little bit different as well.
Interesting. So, okay, well, let's start at the top. Will you be reprising your role?
Yes, I will be playing myself as Tuvok, and I will be working with Walter Koenig's Chekhov as well.
And this is not an alternate universe. This
No.
isn't Mirror. This is
this is real time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were you saying? There's other people who aren't recognizable.
They're recognizable, but they will be a little bit different for different reasons.
Okay.
They may have gone through some changes in that 11-year period, and thus they will not be exactly the same. They will be the same characters and same people, but they will be a little bit different than the way we've seen them. And that may be based on what they're doing and what their choices have been over the last 10 years.
Well, I mean, sure, it's been 10 years. Lots can happen.
Exactly.
Okay, so I understand Garrett Wong
Yes.
is in it. Is he reprising his role?
Yes, Garrett will be back as Kim.
Is he still an ensign? Did he do that?
No, he's not an ensign,
Okay.
and we're not even sure, how he's affiliated with the Federation in that sense. Right at this point in time. Also, the Doctor's going to be back as well. We're looking at the Doctor's character.
Oh, great.
Also, somewhat different than what we knew him before. So there are some minor changes. My character will be basically the same, and Chekhov as well. However, our purpose and our roles within the story will probably be different than what we've seen before.
Let's talk a little about what your, not Tuvok, but your role in this production, or at least the first episode, is as director.
Right.
And you also directed Of Gods and Men.
Yes.
First question, when did you first get the directing bug?
Well, I started on the series Voyager. We had an opportunity, by the grace of the executive producer Rick Berman at the time, to be able to intern, if you will, behind the scenes during the production, the entire production process of each one of the episodes. And if we were interested in directing, we'd have to put in our time doing that for about 3 years.
Wow.
And so I spent a lot of time not only on the set, observing on the set when I was working and asking questions of the DP, but I spent a lot of time sitting in the editing room with the editor, cutting raw footage together. And that's really where it comes, where you really learn, how the camera works and what you're gonna have once you're finished shooting. Because you have to, when you're shooting, you have to see that as you're doing it. You have to see how that's going to play out in your mind before you shoot it. And so that I spent time doing that. We spent time in production meetings and then also in the editing process with the producers in post to see what he preferred and didn't prefer. And you have to have that information because as a director for television, you're basically working for the executive producer and not for yourself.
Now, what do you mean? What does that mean?
That
I
means
don't work
essentially, as in television, the executive producers are the ones who control the entire process, and they also basically determine the look and feel of the piece. So each series has a certain look and feel. If you watch CSI, it always looks basically the same. It's lit the same. It's got certain types of shots. The DPs that you work with, directors of photography for these shows, basically know how the show's supposed to look and how it's they shoot in a certain style. When you come on as a director, you're there basically just to get the show in the can, and along the lines of the way the show is designed to look. So if you direct a pilot, for example, you as the director are setting the tone for that series. So if I am directing Renegades and it becomes a television project, the tone, the way, the look and feel of the show that we're establishing now will more than likely be what carries over if it's picked up as a show. It will continue to look similar in style. So as opposed to shooting a feature like Gods and Men, which the directors tend to have more say-so about how the film is going to look and feel. The director is the one that has control of almost all of that. So much more influence with the director on a feature film as opposed to any kind of television project where you're basically working for the producers.
Is the goal behind Star Trek Renegades to be sort of like a new media pilot for a television, like a studio-based TV show?
Absolutely. We are, and it's one of the reasons that we wanted to establish. We're taking great pains in terms of working with the art direction, with the writers, with the actors, is to establish a new look for the series. We want something that's new. We don't want to do the same thing we've already seen.
Been done.
Yeah, we want to go beyond that in terms of look and the feel, a little bit more edge, a little bit more pace, and in terms of not only the characters but just the way it's shot. So we want to go beyond that. Also the way the costumes will be laid out, et cetera, et cetera. We're working on entirely different looks for the costumes, and all that stuff is designed to set us apart. And so if we as a new series, even more so than a feature, we would be establishing this new look and feel. Next Gen came out, as opposed to the original series, completely new look and feel. Now we're going to take it to the next level and do something, again, very different than what we had.
So talk to me a little bit more about, in particular, your directing style, and what is your vision for this first episode? Like, are you gonna try to make it like a NYPD Blue, like shaky camera? Is it gonna be a real standard 3-camera shoot? Do you have something like that thought through?
Yeah, I think we are going to, based on what our sets look like, how they're constructed, things like that. A lot of times you have to work within the frame of what you have in terms of your location. So I would like to do, as far as in some cases a look and feel that's sort of clandestine, shadowy, mysterious, and then in some other respects very much with a little bit of an edge. The way the camera is going to be used, yes, a little bit more movement. The angles may be a little more extreme. Depending upon, again, what the sets are, I want to be shooting through things and around things as opposed to, and keep everything kind of moving and flowing. I did a little bit of that in Gods and Men, and I want to continue to do some of that kind of thing as well in this show.
Let's talk specifically about technology. You had mentioned that when you were working on Voyager, going through the internship sort of where you would learn about cameras and lenses and editing. Well, now everything's changed. Now you can buy a Canon and you're shooting in HD. You go home and you edit it on your laptop.
That's right.
And you do sound in your bathroom. So
Exactly.
Talk to me a little bit about how you feel that the changing technology has affected independent filmmaking.
It's been unbelievable in terms of, and it keeps changing every 3 to 6 months. It takes another step forward. It has allowed virtually anyone in the country, if not the world, to be able to shoot a full-length feature film with what you just mentioned. A couple of cameras that used to be used for taking photographs now can shoot, a full-screen, high-resolution HD film video, and you can take them and put them, like you said, on your laptop or your desktop and can cut the whole thing yourself together. They have programs for sound. They have programs for post. They have programs for effects. If you want to take the time to learn all that, you can literally do it by yourself. It has changed so dramatically now, and to our advantage, obviously, to be able to put these things on for a lot less money than it would normally have costed to do so, because you don't have to buy film stock and things like that. Definitely as far as shooting style, I've noticed that I'm spoiled, because if I'm working on a digital project, and not only myself, but I just worked on a project, Rampart, which is a feature film with Woody Harrelson, and we had the director on that film exactly the same thing that I do in terms of these days when if I'm directing a scene, they let the just let the camera roll. And we
because no film
do the
stock to
takes
burn
over
through,
again.
yeah.
Just keep it going.
Yeah.
Not a cutting and slating. We don't have to, because we've got digital. We can just, it's a hard drive. We just, it's all numbers. So now, I do the same thing. I like to keep the camera rolling and get the actors, get them on a pace, get them on a ramp, and just let them just, get that stuff, and then just cut out the piece you need at the end of the day. So it keeps it from having to stop and start, and
Sure.
it keeps the pace going. Every day.
Sure.
So yes, the technology has dramatically changed in that regard, and also just in terms of budgetary aspects and access. People can get into the game now a lot easier.
And I've got to assume that's a huge part of what makes projects like Of Gods and Men and Star Trek Renegades possible, not having that huge overhead of camera rental, film processing,
Right.
color timing, negative
Right.
cutting, all that's just gone.
Yeah, you can, the cost of the cameras, the availability of the types of cameras that are out there now, you don't have to shoot on an Alexa or a Red. You can shoot on, like I said, on a 7D or 5D or some of the other companies' video cameras that look just as good. The main thing in terms of the budgets and stuff, which have always been the case, are the locations. The sets and locations are really the issue.
Yeah.
As far as finding it's not the talent, it's not the equipment, it's the locations. You gotta have those, and that's where the expenditures really, I think, mount as far as being able to shoot, because your production value is based on your locations. If it's sci-fi, you've also got to have some money in post for the effects and things like that.
When you did Of Gods and Men, was that shot on film or was that?
Gods and Men was shot on mini DV, so
Wow.
digital tape.
Fantastic.
We did a Panasonic, we used a DVX camera, which is really a really good camera, 24p. So it shoots essentially at the same frame rate as film does. And it looks very good. I've always been impressed with that camera, even today, and it's considered ancient technology, quote unquote. Given,
Well, it's a full 10 years old
yes,
now.
What we have now, but it's still a really good camera. We use two of them the entire time, and we always roll two cameras. And again, because of the cost of the cameras you can get now, you can get two or three of them and just roll with three cameras all at the same time and get all of your coverage done a lot faster. So, essentially when it comes down to, again, the factors of cost also for period pieces is not just the sets and locations. Again, for shooting period, whether it's older or future, those are the issues even more so, because it's not contemporary. You can't just, use somebody's house. You can't just, grab your wardrobe out of the closet.
Right.
You have to have the right wardrobe and things, and that's another cost that has to be considered for shooting this type of thing, as well as the props and all the set pieces you might be using.
Interesting. So there's a lot of other things that you wouldn't, like if you were shooting a cop drama.
Yeah.
A lot of things you wouldn't have to worry about that you do.
You can find those easier.
Sure.
You don't have them laying around their house. You can go down to Staples and get them.
I know I have handcuffs in my bedroom.
Well, we don't want to go into the details.
So
of
sorry,
that.
I'm so sorry.
Keep that on the. Oh yes.
File under TMI.
Yeah.
When you directed Of Gods and Men, was that your first feature film you directed?
As a matter of fact, it was the first feature. I had only done episodic work before that. Did some recreations for TLC and Discovery for about 3 years, and then came into Gods and Men as the first full-length feature. Yeah.
Cool. And was that like when you were doing that? Were you like, this is I've arrived. This is fantastic. I love this. I want to do this every day. Features.
Actually, I do like working on features. They are much harder to get as far as the types of, to have the job and get to book the projects and do them. They're much harder. There's usually a span of time between each one that you do, as opposed to television. And as much as television is far more lucrative and regular, if you would get into the loop and start working, it's a sweet gig to be in. I do like features, independent features, because the director again has a lot more say-so over how the project is going to look and feel. You can literally, you have taking the script and the text and everything off the page and bringing it to life. You can use a lot more. You have a lot more creative leeway to bring this thing to the forefront, as opposed to, like I said, a television. This is your baby, this is your project, and you're the one that paints that canvas, as opposed to somebody else telling you, well, you gotta use these colors only, and, you know.
Right.
Just
Right.
rearrange them, you know, but you gotta use those colors.
Right.
Yeah.
So after doing Of Gods and Men, and now you're looking at Renegades, a couple years have passed. What were some lessons that you learned as a director on Of Gods and Men that you want to make sure you remember when you're doing Renegades?
I think the main thing, as far as working on a low budget project like Gods and Men and or on Renegades, any kind of indie film, you know, you have to work within the budgetary restraints. You have to work with what you have. So the major thing about the process is, from my aspect, is flexibility. I got to be able to work with something I may have planned for, but I got to have a plan B and C. So my main lesson is, what's plan B and C? Always have that ready to go, because that day could come up and you don't have, you know, the location you were supposed to have, or you don't have the actor you're supposed to have, or you don't have the props, or whatever it may be, and you got to have a plan B and C to go with right then and there. And so the flexibility is one of the major lessons, that and having a fallback, a secondary plan. Because sometimes you don't, you know, these things will happen. It's a difference between working on that and say, for example, an episode of a TV show, or working on an A picture with full funding. You know, you may not get, you know, the airplane shot that you wanted to get. You may not get this other thing or that location, and you've got to work somehow around that. And I've always, you know, I've always gone about the directing process also switching hats between director and producer. I understand, you know, the limitations of budget. I understand that I may not be able to get the crane shot that I want, you know, and I can do something maybe as a backup, or do something that's an alternate and still get a similar effect. So it's about trying to be creative, what you have to work with, and being flexible, and like I said, having a plan B and a C.
I've worked on projects that use Reds, and I personally believe that for the overhead that comes with running that camera, it's it's worth just going with like a 5D.
I agree.
I mean, granted, you get 4,000 lines of resolution, but who cares?
Well,
you're going to be crunching it down.
You're going to be crunching it down. It's going to be, you know, I just shot a whole web series on a 7D, and that thing is spectacular.
Yeah.
It's spectacular. If you have decent lenses, you got high-speed lenses, man, you're done.
Yeah.
So,
this is my favorite part of the interview so far. It's good stuff. No, that's really cool. It's really cool. Where is Renegades filming?
well, right now we're probably going to be getting a couple of locations from a location service to suffice for the Federation offices and building and things like that. We're probably going to be we're talking about using a studio out in the valley that has ship set already built.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to redress that ship set, and then we're going to probably build one of the layers for our bad guys in the story, so on the same soundstage. So we want to try to at least get 3 locations under one spot. We can park there for, you know, a week or whatever, and get everything we need, and then move on. So that's what we're looking at right now, is a couple different places. Again, because it's a sci-fi piece, anything that we rent or use outside, you know, of building something ourselves, has to suffice for it looking like it's in the future. And we're talking about the future, you know, way out there in the future. So it's got to be very cool looking. I've talked to the art director about it a couple of times, and we're going to go ahead and just get some location services on board and try to find a couple of really interesting, architecturally interesting spots that give us a future look, as far as a couple of the spots. But the ship stuff that we build or whatever we use, either it's going to be something that's already been built and we redress it, or we're going to be adding to it with construction. So.
Renegades has Kickstarter.
Right.
And you made a ton of money on it.
Yeah, because it's fan-based. You know, Sky, the producer, had one other project that he had put together called Free Space, which was a very cool story. It had a rogue sort of renegade feel to it, and I read that script and thought it was a very cool story. When I looked at the price, you know, looking at the price of the things, you know, based on the script, I thought, oh man, it's a lot of bread to do this. And he was going to launch that project initially, but then at the last minute he decided to put together another Trek series pilot project to try to pitch. And in doing so, when you put that on, Now you've got fans from one end of the world to the other who haven't seen a new series yet.
Yeah.
And boy, if they could be part of getting this thing launched,
Yeah.
you know, even if it's a small part, just to be able to see it.
Yeah.
To have something to look at.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to look at as far as
Right.
you can do. So you really can't go wrong, and that's exactly what he did. Strategically, that's a very good plan for raising money, is simply
Yeah.
let the fans support it. You know.
Yeah, it's great because I guess like you're saying, if you haven't seen something that fits in this universe for, I mean, what's it been? When did, I guess Enterprise went off the air?
Probably
Oh, no.
2002, maybe.
All right, so 10 years. It's
Yeah.
been 10 years
Yeah.
since there's been non-JJ track in existence.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, I guess like if you could give $10 and then see
Yeah.
something new, that's a
Something new.
great deal.
Totally, and potentially down the line. I mean, if we're lucky, we can get this thing on and do it as a series. So.
Now, were you surprised at the reaction on Kickstarter, or is that pretty much what you expected?
I was not surprised when he told me he was going to do it. I thought, yeah, okay. You know, half of me said, you know, we don't own Star Trek, so you know we don't. You know, that's the only drag about it is you can't just go out and do what you want with it. And it's you know we're tied to CBS with it. So the other half of me said, yeah, but you'll raise the money, and that's exactly what he was thinking. Is we can actually shoot it because we'll have the money. You know?
Now, talk to me about that. Like, I assume you don't own the rights to the character of Tuvok. Of course, you
Absolutely
you
not.
embody
Yes.
him.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of get away with making, like, does the Gene Roddenberry estate approve Star Trek Renegades, or
No, it has nothing to do with the Roddenberry estate. It has to do with Paramount CBS. They own the publishing rights and the copyright to Star Trek. It's that simple. You can't sell one iota of anything Trek without their permission.
But for something like Renegades, do they have any creative input? Are they shepherding your
Nope.
project at all?
They have nothing to do with it at all.
Oh, cool. Okay.
No, it's it's an independent project, and they keep a close eye on it just to see what's going on with it. But
Yeah.
but they can't they can't really stop you from doing it legally. They just as long as you keep as long as you don't sell it. That's the main thing.
That's
So-
cool.
So we would rather work with them
Sure.
in this event than try to make this thing happen, than try to go to fight them, as it were.
I can't imagine them not wanting you to succeed.
It's not. It has no effect for them on them,
Right.
unless of course the reaction is such that they might say, well, this is worth putting on, and that is something that saves them all the grief and worry and money and
Yeah,
work if they
yeah.
can put this thing on and give us a budget. And let
It's
us
like a
continue
free
to shoot
pilot,
something.
basically,
It's
yeah.
basically what it is. Yeah.
With J.J. Abrams rebooting the Star Trek
Right.
universe, do you know if Paramount has explicitly decided to never revisit the existing universe, or?
No, I think that I don't. Right? They haven't been interested, and they have been pitched. There's at least 12 projects floating around for series, and everybody has been knocking on their door since Voyager went off the air, and they simply have not bitten on any of those. And whoever's in charge has simply said, we're not interested in doing them. There are economic reasons for that. Number one, if they shot this project, they probably wouldn't be shot here in the States. Probably
Really?
wouldn't be shot here because of the cost.
Really?
There are no science fiction series being shot in the States.
So
Nobody.
it's financially prohibitive to produce a science fiction
That's
show in
right.
California
That's
right now.
right.
Even in the
California,
U.S.
Even in the U.S.
Wow.
Because because of the cost of building the sets and the gadgets, post and everything else, in return for that, typically science fiction series don't garner the largest percentage of the population. The viewership is much higher for everything
CSI
from
Detroit.
CSI to
Right.
Honey Boo Boo,
Right.
whatever. And that's a fact.
It
Honey
is
Boo
what
Boo
it
is
is,
more
yeah.
cost effective than building.
Right.
That's it. And all of your studios and production companies, unlike the old days, are run by bean counters, man.
Right.
People in suits and ties.
Right.
And it's a subsidiary of some giant corp.
They just
They
want to see
don't care.
money.
They just want to say,
Right.
hey, that didn't make anything. What's that doing on? So, Trek and a lot of the sci-fi series are not in the top 20, top 25, top 30 shows. And if they're not, they're not only not going to stay on, they're not going to shoot them. You have to operate at a loss for a certain number of years before you make your money back on a series like that. So, I know shows that have been cut that are nothing but half-hour comedies, and they stop because they can't afford them. They don't want to spend the money. They could afford them, they just don't want to spend the bread,
Huh.
even if the shows are good. So if Trek is not in the top 10 or top 15, if it was, you'd have one every network would have.
Right, right.
But it's not. So you have to consider the fact that down the line they're gonna, you know, it's a matter of how much they spend on. And if they can shoot them in Toronto, you know, which
Yeah.
is where they would go,
Yeah,
and the budget would be a lot less, the actors would be paid less, everything
Right.
would be less.
right.
That's what they would do in order to put the show on.
Huh.
Yeah, that's the way it works.
So then why do it?
Well, I mean, we're doing it as an independent project. What's happening is that the internet and television, of course, is going to blend. And every network now has their own internet channel.
Yeah.
So all that's going to end up being is the internet. And that will change how these shows are produced. And they will simply pay less and less for them to be done. And that's going to be it. And then they can run them on the internet, or they can run them, you know, as a possible series. It's just like I said, if they shot them out of the country,
Yeah.
they could still shoot them and they could still put them on. They could still, you know, do pretty well over time because it
Yeah.
has a very large fan. It has a loyal fan base. I'm gonna say large. It's a loyal fan base.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've got great distribution overseas. That's guaranteed. That's locked up. Then they've got merchandising, so they can make money on this thing. But they will probably prefer not to do it in the States. They'll probably try to do it outside.